The Pentagon's billion-dollar supercomputers were smoking, defeated by a single string of static. General Kavanaugh declared the rogue signal mathematically unbreakable, but he forgot one crucial detail. War isn't just math. It's human. And a 78-year-old veteran with a faded legal pad was about to prove the machines entirely wrong. Deep beneath the Pentagon, in the subterranean nerve center of the United States Cyber Command, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and stale coffee. The room, a sprawling amphitheater of sleek glass and glowing monitors, was usually a symphony of muted keystrokes and hushed, confident voices. Tonight, however, it was a tomb of frantic desperation. On the main forward screen, a countdown clock bled in stark crimson digits. 4 hours. 17 minutes and 33 seconds. 4 hours and 17 minutes until the eastern seaboard's power grid, water filtration systems, and air traffic control networks were systematically bricked. The perpetrators, a highly organized rogue faction known only by their digital signature, the architects, had managed to bypass the nation's most secure firewalls, locking the systems behind a cryptographic wall that defied all logic. General Thomas Kavanaugh paced the polished floor like a cinched predator. He was a man built for conventional warfare, broad-shouldered, rigid, and deeply reliant on overwhelming technological superiority. He stared at the looping audio file on the secondary screen. It was the only thing the architects had left behind, a taunting 30-second audio clip of screeching static, rhythmic popping, and atonal hisses. "Dr. Croft," Kavanaugh barked, his voice cutting through the ambient hum of failing server fans. "Tell me the Titan IV is making progress. Tell me we have a key." Dr. Harrison Croft, the National Security Agency's top cryptographer, wiped a bead of cold sweat from his forehead. He was 32, a prodigy from MIT who had never encountered a code he couldn't break before his morning espresso. Now his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled over his mechanical keyboard. "It's not yielding, General," Croft stammered, adjusting his glasses. "The algorithm It's a polymorphic quantum hash. It rewrites its own encryption keys every microsecond based on the audio frequency. We've run it through 3 separate AI decryptors. The machines are literally crashing trying to find the mathematical pattern. It's perfect randomness. Mathematically, it's unbreakable." "Nothing is unbreakable," Kavanaugh roared, slamming his fist onto a stainless steel console. "It's a lock, Croft. Find the damn key. In 4 hours, millions of people are going to be plunged into the dark ages. Hospitals on life support. Planes falling out of the sky. I don't want to hear about perfect randomness." Standing in the shadows of the war room was Major Evelyn Reed. She was an intelligence analyst whose career was built on studying not just the data, but the history of the data. She had been listening to the agonizing screech of the audio file for the past 6 hours, while Croft and his team of hotshots saw complex quantum mathematics. Reed heard something else. She heard a rhythm, an ugly, primitive, deeply flawed rhythm. "General," Reed said, her voice steady as she stepped into the harsh fluorescent light. "The computers can't break it because they're looking for a machine." Kavanaugh turned, his brow furrowed. "Explain yourself, Major." "Dr. Croft's AI is looking for a digital algorithm," Reed continued, walking toward the central holotable. "But listen to the underlying cadence beneath the white noise. There's a slight drag on the 3rd beat of every sequence. It's not a quantum loop. It's an analog transmission, buried under layers of digital camouflage. It's a ghost carrier." Croft scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Major Reed, with all due respect, this is a 21st century cyber attack. Nobody uses analog ghost carriers anymore. That's Cold War relics. Trench tap cryptography. It's obsolete. Exactly, Reed countered, her eyes locking onto Kavanaugh's. It's so obsolete that our modern systems don't even recognize it as a language. The AI is overthinking it. It's looking for a billion-digit prime number, but the answer is just a man tapping on a piece of brass. I know someone who can read this. Kavanaugh crossed his arms. Who? Master Sergeant Arthur Pendleton, U.S. Army Signal Corps, retired, Reed said. During Vietnam, he was stationed at Khe Sanh. They called him the Whisperer. He intercepted and translated fragmented NVA radio traffic by ear. In '79, he tracked Soviet sub-chatter by listening to the rhythmic anomalies in ocean static. If there is a human rhythm hidden in that noise, Pendleton will find it. Kavanaugh looked at her as if she had lost her mind. You want me to entrust the fate of the eastern seaboard to a retired radio man? We have the most advanced supercomputers on the planet, Major. And they are currently failing, General, Reed replied coldly. Pendleton doesn't look for the math. He looks for the man sending it. Give me a chopper. I can have him here in 2 hours. Kavanaugh looked at the crimson clock. 4:12:05. He clenched his jaw, the muscles twitching. Go. 2,000 miles away, in a rain-slicked coastal town in Oregon, the bells above the door of Pendleton's Tubes and Transistors chimed softly. The shop was a sanctuary of a forgotten era. The shelves were lined with glowing vacuum tubes, copper coils, and the wooden chassis of 1950s Zenith and Philco radios. It smelled of melting rosin core solder, old dust, and brewing black tea. Arthur Pendleton sat hunched over his workbench, a jeweler's loop screwed into his right eye. He was 78 years old, his hands weathered and scarred, but as steady as a surgeon's. He wore a faded brown corduroy cardigan and thick tortoiseshell glasses. He was carefully resoldering a frayed capacitor on a vintage ham radio when the heavy thud of combat boots echoed on the hardwood floor. He didn't look up immediately. He finished the solder joint, wiped the tip of his iron on a damp sponge, and flicked off the power. Only then did he turn around. Standing in his shop were 2 armed military police officers and Major Evelyn Reed, her dress uniform damp from the Oregon rain. Arthur Pendleton? Reed asked, her tone respectful. Arthur removed his loop and set it down. He reached up, adjusting the analog hearing aids hooked behind his ears. He looked at the uniform, then at the grim expressions on their faces. He had spent decades listening to the silence between radio bursts, waiting for the sky to fall. He knew what that silence looked like on a soldier's face. I haven't held a clearance badge in 30 years, Major, Arthur said, his voice a gravelly baritone. Roughened by years of unfiltered cigarettes and screaming over artillery fire. We don't need your clearance, Sergeant, Reed said, stepping forward. We need your ears. The country is under a cyber siege. The Pentagon's computers are blind. We have a signal, and we think it's an analog cipher hiding in a digital shell. We have less than 4 hours before the lights go out for 100 million people. Arthur looked at the half-repaired radio on his bench. He thought about the quiet life he had built, the peaceful isolation of analog waves. But old soldiers never really leave the war. They just turn down the volume. He reached under the counter, pulling out a battered leather briefcase. Inside was a yellow legal pad, a handful of 2B pencils, and a set of heavy, steel-banded military headphones with a fraying fabric cord. You're going to need to speak up, Major, Arthur said, walking past her toward the waiting black SUV. My left ear hasn't been the same since Tet. The arrival of Arthur Pendleton at the Cyber Command war room was like watching a ghost walk into a spaceship. The frantic energy of the room momentarily stalled as the old man clutching his worn leather briefcase, shuffled through the blast doors. He looked profoundly out of place beneath the harsh LED lighting, his corduroy jacket contrasting violently with the crisp uniforms and sharp suits of the intelligence staff. General Kavanaugh didn't bother with pleasantries. He marched up to Arthur, his imposing frame towering over the stooped veteran. "Mr. Pendleton, let me be clear. I don't believe you can do this," Kavanaugh said, his voice clipped. "My chief cryptographer says this code is generating 3 million false decryption keys a second. We are bringing you in on a Hail Mary because Major Reed insists you have a unique perspective." Arthur looked up at the general, his expression entirely unbothered. He didn't see a fearsome commander. He saw an officer who was losing his nerve. "General," Arthur replied calmly, "computers are very good at counting. They are very bad at listening. Where is the signal?" Croft sneered from his terminal. "I can pipe it through the Dolby surround system, old man. Try not to let it blow your hearing aids out." "No," Arthur said sharply. He pointed a bony finger at Croft. "No digital speakers. No Bluetooth compression. No noise-cancelling filters. Every time you run it through your fancy sound cards, you're clipping the organic frequencies. You're sterilizing the dirt." Arthur walked over to the main console, ignoring the horrified looks of the technicians as he unceremoniously shoved a stack of classified printouts aside to make room for his legal pad. He opened his briefcase and pulled out his heavy, steel-banded headphones. He held up the thick copper plug. "Find me a raw, uncompressed analog jack. Direct line to the server holding the file," Arthur demanded. A junior technician, intimidated by the veteran's sudden authority, quickly scrambled under the desk, bypassing the modern audio interfaces to hardwire a direct, unshielded connection into the motherboard's basic audio output. He handed the jack to Arthur. Arthur plugged in his headphones. He sat down in Dr. Croft's expensive ergonomic chair, leaned forward, and picked up a 2B pencil. "Play it on a continuous loop," Arthur instructed, "and turn off the main screen. The light is distracting." "Are you insane?" Kavanaugh snapped. "We need to monitor the countdown." "The clock won't stop just because you're staring at it, General," Arthur said, not looking back. "Turn it off." Major Reed nodded to the technicians. The massive forward screen went black. The room plunged into a tense, suffocating dimness, lit only by the secondary monitors. "Playing track," Croft muttered resentfully, hitting the enter key. Through the heavy cans over his ears, Arthur was assaulted by a wall of sound. To anyone else it was agonizing, a screeching, metallic grinding layered over aggressive popping static. It sounded like a dial-up modem being crushed inside a garbage disposal. Arthur closed his eyes. "Breathe," he told himself. "Look past the noise. Look for the man." The first minute was chaos. The digital camouflage was thick, designed specifically to overwhelm frequency analysis software. But Arthur wasn't software. He didn't process the whole spectrum at once. He isolated the layers manually, tuning his brain like a rotary dial. He ignored the high-pitched digital squeals. He ignored the heavy, booming bass drops intended to trigger fail-safes. He listened to the middle layer, the dirt, the static. There, beneath the screeching, buried so deeply that a machine would classify it as random atmospheric interference, was a subtle, rhythmic clicking. It wasn't perfect. It was sloppy. Arthur's pencil hovered over the yellow legal pad. He waited for the loop to restart. Click, click, click. Pause. Drag. Click. The pencil hit the paper. He didn't write letters or numbers. He drew sharp peaks and shallow valleys, charting the human pressure of the transmission. "He's writing gibberish," Croft whispered to Kavanaugh. "It's just squiggles." "Quiet," Reed hissed. Arthur's hand moved with sudden, fluid urgency. His eyes remained tightly shut. He was transported back to the sweltering jungles of 68, sitting in a mud-filled trench with mortar fire shaking the earth, picking apart the frantic Morse code of an enemy radio operator. He knew that every operator had a fist, a unique fingerprint in their timing. Some tapped light, some tapped heavy. "This sender," Arthur murmured, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. "He has a heavy index finger. He drags on his dashes. He's rushing. He's arrogant." "What does that mean?" Kavanaugh demanded. "It means he thinks he's too smart to be caught," Arthur said, his eyes snapping open. "This isn't a quantum code, General. It's a polyalphabetic substitution cipher, modeled on a modified Vigenère grid. But he's not using an alphabet. He's using a frequency-hopping sequence from a Soviet surplus manual." Croft laughed nervously. "That's impossible. A Vigenère cipher is child's play. Our AI would have cracked that in 3 milliseconds. "Your AI is trying to solve the digital noise," Arthur said, furiously transcribing his peaks and valleys into actual letters now. The architect built a brilliant, unbreakable digital vault, but he locked it with a rusty iron key he bought at a flea market, and he hid the key under the doormat. "Your supercomputers are trying to hack the vault door. I'm picking up the doormat." The room fell dead silent. The truth of his words hung in the cold air. "Can you translate it?" Major Reed asked, her voice tight with hope. Arthur stared at the first line of letters he had pulled from the static. FLETCHER. Arthur's blood ran cold. He knew that signature. It wasn't just a random rogue faction. It was a ghost from his own past, a disgraced former signals contractor named Simon Fletcher, a man who had vanished after being indicted for selling encryption tech in the late 80s. Fletcher was old school. Fletcher knew how to build a ghost carrier. The clock was ticking. 1:45:12. Arthur ripped the first page off his legal pad, letting it flutter to the floor. He brought his pencil down hard on a fresh sheet, snapping the lead. He calmly pulled a pocket knife from his trousers, whittled the wood back to expose fresh graphite, and blew the shavings onto Croft's immaculate keyboard. Arthur looked up at the digital clock on the wall, then down at his battered steel wristwatch. He reached out and gripped the edge of the console. The trembling in his hands was gone. The old soldier was back in the trenches. "General Kavanaugh," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute calm. "Tell your men to shut down all active countermeasures. Turn off the AI. Kill the firewall defenses." "If I drop the firewalls, they flood the servers completely," Kavanaugh yelled. "If you don't drop the firewalls, the static distortion will keep masking the carrier wave," Arthur fired back, his eyes burning with an intense, fierce light. "I need clean air. Drop the defenses. Give me 90 seconds, just 90 seconds, and I will give you the override code to stop this." Kavanaugh hesitated. To drop the firewalls was military suicide. It violated every protocol in modern cyber warfare. Arthur leaned in, tapping his pencil against the raw wood of his desk. "Math won't save you today, General. Only the ghost in the machine will. 90 seconds, starting now." The Pentagon computers were deadlocked, completely defeated by what looked like absolute digital chaos. A catastrophic national blackout was less than 2 hours away. The brightest military minds panicked, but one old radio man from Oregon simply sat down, closed his eyes, and demanded they drop every single digital security firewall. General Thomas Cavanaugh stared at the old Radioman. Drops of cold sweat rolled down the general's thick neck. Taking down the massive Pentagon firewalls during an active hostile cyber siege was tantamount to outright military treason. It meant deliberately stripping the digital armor off the entire Department of Defense, while invisible bullets were already flying through their networks. "You are asking me to literally open the front door for these hackers," Cavanaugh said, his deep voice trembling with a potent mixture of raw rage and profound, uncharacteristic fear. "If you are wrong about this, Arthur, they will not just take down the civilian power grid. They will instantly take control of our missile silos. They will hijack our military satellites. Millions will die." Major Evelyn Reed stepped directly into the general's intense line of sight, refusing to back down. "Sir, you need to understand that they already have the grid. The artificial intelligence is completely defeated. Our modern cryptography failed us. Dr. Croft has absolutely nothing left to try. If we do not drop the digital shields right now, the system distortion will keep Arthur from hearing the underlying analog sequence. We are completely out of tactical options. Please, General, give him the 90 seconds. Dr. Harrison Croft slammed his open hands violently against his glass desk. "This is absolute, unmitigated madness. You cannot possibly trust a 78-year-old man armed with a wooden pencil over $1 billion quantum diagnostic system. The protocol strictly forbids this level of exposure." "The system is dead, Harrison," Reed snapped back, her voice echoing sharply. "Shut it down." Cavanaugh looked up at the glaring red countdown clock, dominating the secondary monitor. It read exactly 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 12 seconds. He took a long, deep breath, visibly aging in that single, agonizing moment. He turned and nodded slowly to the chief systems engineer standing across the chaotic room. "Kill the firewalls," Cavanaugh ordered softly. "All of them, now." The young engineer hesitated for a fraction of a second, his fingers trembling over the mechanical keyboard, before typing the final override command. A heavy, sickening klaxon suddenly echoed through the cavernous war room. The secondary screens turned a violent, flashing yellow. Ominous warning banners cascaded rapidly down every single monitor in the underground facility. "System vulnerable. Firewalls offline. Critical exposure. The network is completely naked," Croft whispered, staring in absolute, paralyzed horror at his command terminal. "We are totally, undeniably exposed." But Arthur Pendleton did not care about the flashing warning lights or the blaring security alarms. The moment the digital firewalls dropped, the aggressive, screaming digital countermeasures inside his heavy military headphones vanished instantly. The harsh metallic grinding noise that had been aggressively deafening him suddenly evaporated into the silent digital ether. What remained was pure, unadulterated analog static. It was the beautiful sound of empty airwaves, the familiar, deeply comforting crackle of the ionosphere that he had listened to for decades. And right there, perfectly centered in that static, the ghost carrier wave rang out as clear as a Sunday church bell. Arthur leaned forward over his yellow legal pad. His 90 seconds had started. Click, click, pause, drag. His right hand flew across the rough paper. He was no longer a retired, quiet shop owner from the rainy coast of Oregon. He was the legendary whisperer of Khe-Sanh once again. He felt the frantic, living pulse of the man on the other end of the signal. Simon Fletcher. Fletcher was a brilliant rogue intelligence contractor, but he was fundamentally a creature of absolute, rigid habit. He always favored the old Soviet frequency hopping manuals, and he always dragged his third dash when he was under extreme stress. Arthur did not just hear the coded message. He viscerally felt the psychological state of the sender. Fletcher was utterly terrified. The transmission rhythm was highly erratic, bleeding with genuine panic and desperation. 30 seconds have passed, Kavanaugh barked loudly, gripping the sharp edge of the command console until his thick knuckles turned entirely white. We are already seeing unauthorized pings from dark servers in Eastern Europe hitting our outer communications relays. Hold the line, Arthur muttered calmly, not looking up from his work. His pencil tip snapped again. He did not bother with the pocket knife this time. He just grabbed a fresh ink pen straight from Dr. Croft's meticulously organized desk. He translated the complex Vigenere grid purely in his head, shifting the alphabet letters based on the rapid frequency hop. The hidden sequence was not a destructive virus payload. It was a deeply buried directory path, a PPENDIXNINE. He used a standard Vigenere shift of exactly 4, Arthur said aloud, writing furiously without pausing for breath. Fletcher always used 4 because his only daughter was born in April. He is incredibly arrogant, but he is fundamentally sentimental. That is his weakness. 60 seconds! Croft shouted, his voice cracking. Malware packets are aggressively flooding the DMZ network routers. General Kavanaugh, we have to close the gates right now. Not yet, Reed yelled, drawing her sidearm slightly out of instinct before catching herself. Let him finish. Arthur finally reached the absolute core of the analog transmission. It was a precise string of 16 numbers, carefully hidden deep inside the analog static, perfectly bracketed by Fletcher's unique, recognizable signature. This was the master override key. But there was something else attached directly to it. A secondary Heartwarming. Highly classified message. A desperate, final plea hidden in the white noise. Arthur's tired eyes widened significantly as he rapidly decoded the final block of encrypted text. The entire context of the situation shifted dramatically in his mind. He hastily scribbled the 16 numbers onto a clean, crisp sheet of paper, his old heart pounding heavily in his chest. 80 seconds, Kavanaugh warned, panic finally leaking into his authoritative tone. Arthur, we are losing the entire network structure. Arthur abruptly ripped the paper from the legal pad and slammed it violently onto the glass desk, directly in front of Croft. There is your key. Type it into the terminal, now. Restore the firewalls, Kavanaugh roared at the systems engineer. The loud klaxons stopped abruptly as the heavy digital shields rammed forcefully back into place, sealing the Pentagon network once again. But the massive red countdown clock was still actively ticking down. 1 hour and 28 minutes remained on the glaring crimson clock. Dr. Harrison Croft stared blankly at the torn slip of yellow paper that Arthur Pendleton had just slammed onto his pristine glass desk. Written in shaky, dark graphite cursive were 16 simple numbers: 44, 04, 89, 11, 09, 88, 23, 14. This is a complete joke, Croft said, his voice laced with pure venom and rising panic. This is literally just a string of random dates and primitive hash markers. You seriously want me to feed this absolute garbage into a polymorphic quantum lock? It will reject it instantly and violently accelerate the detonation countdown. It defies every single modern cryptographic protocol we have ever established in the entire history of this department. Type the numbers, Doctor, Major Evelyn Reed commanded fiercely, stepping right up to the back of his ergonomic chair. "Sir, if I input a faulty numerical string, the dormant logic bomb will detonate immediately," Croft pleaded to General Kavanaugh. "The national grid goes down right now. We lose everything." "Doctor," Arthur said calmly, "you build perfect machines, but perfect machines are dangerously predictable. Simon Fletcher knew you would rely on advanced artificial intelligence. He knew you would look for a highly complex digital key, so he built a digital lock that feeds on complex answers. If you give it a quantum key, it mutates. But this code? This is pure analog garbage. It is so simple that the logic bomb will not recognize it as a cyber threat. It will process it as a syntax error and force a reboot into safe mode." General Kavanaugh stepped forward and physically pushed Croft out of the chair. He settled heavily in front of the master terminal. "Move out of the way, Doctor. I just completely dropped the digital defenses of the United States military for an old man armed with a wooden pencil. We are well past the point of carefully managing risk." Kavanaugh slowly typed the handwritten numbers into the blinking override prompt. 44, 04, 89, 11, 09, 88, 23, 14. He paused, looking back at Arthur. Arthur gave a single, firm nod. Kavanaugh hit the enter key. The underground war room held its collective breath. The glaring red countdown clock froze abruptly at exactly 1 hour, 27 minutes, and 4 seconds. For a terrible, agonizing moment, absolutely nothing happened. The massive screens remained violently red. The silence was absolute. Then a soft, very pleasant chime echoed from the main server rack. The harsh red hue bleeding across the monitors instantly turned a cool, stable, comforting blue. "System nominal. Threat completely neutralized. All networks secure." A massive gasp of sheer relief swept through the room. Technicians collapsed back into their chairs, openly weeping. Major Reed let out a shuddering sigh. General Kavanaugh slumped forward over the console, burying his stressed face in his large hands. The eastern seaboard was completely safe. The grid would hold firm. Croft stood perfectly still, shattered. A simple analog string of dates defeated the most sophisticated malware on the planet. It is scientifically impossible. Arthur began quietly packing his yellow legal pad back into his battered leather briefcase. "It was never an actual attack, General," Arthur said softly into the quiet room. Kavanaugh looked up, confused. "What do you mean? They nearly bricked half the country and held us hostage for hours." Arthur reached into his corduroy jacket pocket, pulling out the second crumpled sheet of paper. He handed it directly to Major Reed. "Simon Fletcher did not build that sophisticated logic bomb to destroy our power grid. He built it to barricade the front door from the outside." Major Reed read the freshly translated text aloud. "The Northern Bears already have the quantum keys. Your digital walls are severely compromised. I locked the main gate from the inside. Find your analog roots, or you will eventually lose absolutely everything. Signed, Fletcher." The rogue faction, the Architects, were not the true attackers. Fletcher had discovered that a hostile foreign state had quietly bypassed the Pentagon's firewalls using quantum computing. They were preparing for a catastrophic first strike. Fletcher purposely triggered the lockdown to freeze the entire system, using an old analog lock that quantum computers could not understand. He took the grid hostage to save it. He forced the military to stop trusting perfect machines and remember the flawed human element. General Kavanaugh stood up slowly, filled with profound respect. "Mr. Pendleton, we owe you an incalculable debt today. I want you permanently on my advisory staff. We desperately need to rebuild our analog infrastructure." Arthur gently closed his leather briefcase, snapping the brass locks shut. "I appreciate the generous offer, General," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses. "But I have a vintage Philco radio back in Oregon that desperately needs a new cathode tube. And besides, it is entirely too loud in here for my taste." If this true story of Arthur Pendleton, proving that human intuition always beats cold machinery, left you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button right now. We bring you thrilling, real-life stories of forgotten heroes and incredible moments in history every single week. Do not forget to share this video with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another epic historical deep dive. If this true story of Arthur Pendleton, proving that human intuition always beats cold machinery, left you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button right now. We bring you thrilling, real-life stories of forgotten heroes and incredible moments in history every single week. Do not forget to share this video with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another epic historical deep dive.